you, April 16th.
So let's gradually get back into your seats. I think the last session.
Oh, crazy. In April 16th.
Here we go. I'm going to start talking again and see if it works as people start to move back to their seats. The last session was identifying an area where we really have a huge amount of work ahead of us, but it's vital for the success of the collaboratory projects that have really exposed this in a big way, as well as the PCORNet projects that are underway. This session is equally boots on the ground problems that all of us have to face when we're talking about networks and data sharing. So I'm really pleased that Paul Wallace will be moderating this session. He's the Chief Medical Officer and Senior Vice President at Clinical Translation at Optum Labs. And with that, I'll turn it over to Paul, who will introduce the panel.
Great. Well, thanks very much, Eric. And thank you also to all of you who are still here. This has been a really interesting day, I think. And it's certainly been packed with a lot of information. From my own observation, I think that each panel has raised the bar a little bit. So I'm sure, though, that our panel is more than up to the task. And we certainly have a topic which will demand that we be more than up to the task. Our topic, as you're aware, is titled Governance that Accelerates Progress and Sustainability. As we think about this, I guess I wanted to start with a confession. And my confession is that I actually read Modern Healthcare. And the reason I read Modern Healthcare is that the folks that are intended to be in this room in the follow-up session are interviewed in Modern Healthcare. So if you're interested in what they're thinking about and where they see opportunity, that's not a bad lens. And they're not interviewed in Health Affairs, although I suspect that they read Health Affairs and the other journals. So I just would recommend that to you as a consideration. I also, though, I wanted to steal Jim Weinstein's metaphor around the glass. So we do spend a lot of time wrestling with what's it going to take for us to fill up the glass that we have. But I think we got to take a step back and recognize that we need a whole new glass. And the issue that we have to talk about is, as the world is changing, as we're thinking about new roles and new players, and new relationships and new resources, we have a different glass. It's a bigger glass, and what's it going to take to fill that up? It's not starting over. It's building and complementing and extending what we've learned before. But I think that's really the opportunity. And we have to think about what are some critical areas where the rules have changed. As I think about governance, actually one of my life goals is to figure out what governance actually means. But on some level, I think it is about roles, and it is about relationships, and it is about rules. It's also about ritual. And I think that we have to evolve how we actually perform governance in this changing world, in this new glass. So we're all pretty familiar with how the old glass works, and we're all pretty familiar with how the old glass doesn't work. But let's think a little bit about what would be some of the opportunities going forward. So one of the things that I think has been highlighted really well today is that the sources of knowledge are changing pretty dramatically. So, I self-identify as a health services researcher, and I also recognize that I spent most of my career as a supply sider. Whereas researchers, what we do is we create knowledge on the supply side, and we figure if we build a big enough pile, it will trickle down to the demand side, and why the hell wouldn't they use it? But there's another way to think about this that we've heard a lot of discussion here today, that there's both the opportunity to better align the questions that we ask to meet the needs of the demand side, but even more important than that is the knowledge that already exists on the demand side that we haven't done a particularly good job of harvesting. And so I think as we think about this new world going forward, and we think about what are these sources from which we're going to see knowledge coming, and we have to, again, think about what are the rules and regulations and relationships and rituals. Some of the things that we've heard are that, folks in operations are actually pretty sharp, and they're not interested in being staid or static. They're actually changing every day, and it's actually a very disciplined process. So how do we actually tap into that? But drilling down a little bit further, we've heard a lot of great examples about how health systems and how hospitals are fostering a great deal of learning. It may not necessarily be published, it might not meet our rigorous definitions of research, but it certainly is competing for a relatively narrow bandwidth of uptake on the demand side. But there also are a range of other ways that we have to think about this. I think the paradigm of practice-based research is really important, to recognize that every time a physician treats a patient, they're doing an N-of-1 experiment. And how blind are we to actually what those results are? And are there certain situations, like perhaps complex comorbidity, where as we think of the patient as an N-of-1, can we create reference populations that are more appropriate for that really complex N-of-1 in front of us, rather than forcing us to pattern match to the statistical means of distributions that relate to different organs in that patient? So are there different ways that we can think about the data that we're actually going to be led to? But it's also recognizing that there are a lot of other players in this. It's about patients. And it is about, I think that the point was made really well earlier today by Sally, that patients are actually extraordinarily well about synthesizing their experience. We don't need to do that for them. Even just on a practical level, I remember when we were rolling out the electronic medical record for patients at home, you know, if you actually think about it, when patients send you an email, they've actually already done the documentation. It's actually much more efficient, and there isn't a translation thing of figuring out what are they trying to tell you. They already told you. It actually is more efficient. So if we think about where the patient is actually an untapped resource, it also begins to take us to a little different place, but it also reminds us that we haven't actually included them in how we've thought about this going forward. The other example I think we've seen in the last 2 or 3 weeks, there are a group of people that are increasingly self-identifying as health services researchers who are journalists. So think about when you read the Times the day after the Medicare data came out. Those are folks who think of themselves as being data journalists. Only they're working on a cycle time that's like 17 hours, not 17 years, not 17 months, 17 hours. But they're also wrestling with how do they actually use data in a way that incorporates rigor, relevance, and they're certainly accountable for what they put out. So I think that as we think about where are the different inputs coming from, we're realizing that there actually is more than a little competition for us as we're going to go forward. So I do work with Academy Health, and when we've looked at the field of health services research, over half of people that self-identify as health services researchers now don't work in academia. And they work across that whole spectrum of perspectives that we saw in some of the earlier slides. So there's a variety of folks. So the game's changed a little bit. It's not the way that we had necessarily designed it when we trained. The other big thing, though, that I think we particularly want to focus on over the next hour or so is to realize that most of the governance that we've created in the past has been intra-institution. And we figured out how to basically check the boxes and get things done within our own shop. But what's changing for a whole variety of reasons, recognizing that we have a national context now, but also that there are some situations like PedsNet is a great example. When you have rare diseases, you have to actually work across institutions. And I think what all of us are recognizing is that the rules for inter-institutional collaboration are a lot different than how you survive within an institution. And as we think about how the research turf is changing, there are a lot of examples. I think PCORNet is obviously the most robust and is top of mind, but there are a variety of others. I mean, the NIH Collaboratory is certainly a strong example. I think the EDM Forum was mentioned earlier today. If people aren't aware of eGEMS, it's worth looking at and understanding what's in eGEMS. I would strongly recommend you just on this topic, a paper that Devin McGraw, who many of you know, who's an attorney here in the district who works a lot in privacy, has a paper on sustainability and governance it's a systematic review of what's happened in that whole group that I think would be a complement to what you're going to hear today. My organization, Optum Labs, is intentionally a group, research and innovation shop based on a fairly large collection of data that we co-founded with the Mayo Clinic, and we're intentionally bringing in a diverse group of partners that sample across the healthcare ecosystem. So it is about academia, but it's also about healthcare delivery systems. It is about life sciences companies, industry, but it's also about consumer organizations. One of our larger partners actually is AARP, who has consumer data on about 50 million Americans over 50. So there's some interesting ways that you can think about how these partnerships are forming. But I think we're all becoming increasingly aware that it is a new glass, and we're going to have to think a lot about, what are the rules. So the task for our particular group, and fortunately we have a great group to do it, is to talk about governance. The hooker is that it isn't just about governance. They actually asked us to talk about governance that accelerates progress and sustainability. So it isn't just about getting by, it's actually about thriving, and it's also about, oh, by the way, making this a going concern. So it also reminds me a little bit of the triple aim. To me, one of the critical elements of the triple aim is that you don't get to pick one. And I think that many of us spent a generation running around talking about quality, writing business cases, how cost would follow. And it's like 25 years later, and it'll follow any day now. Where I think Brent has taught many of us, and I think it took a lot of us a little while for this to sink in, is that Brent's been talking about value from the beginning. He's actively sought within his entire governance structure and his entire operating structure to think about how do you reconcile the differences between a cost perspective, a quality perspective, and have it roll up into a value perspective. So our challenge as we think about this, if we really want to design durable governance structures, they are going to have to be sustainable, but they also can't be static. So the good news is that we actually have some people that have some practical hands-on experience in doing that complex calculus. So let me just introduce our panel, and then I'll turn things over to them. So our first panelist is going to be Jim Rohack, who I think many of you know. He's at Baylor Scott & White. He's the Chief Health Policy Officer for Baylor Scott & White Health, where he also serves as the Director for the Center for Health Care Policy and as the Medical Director for System Improvement of the Scott & White Health Plan. I think folks are also aware that Jim was the president, he was the 164th president of the AMA. That really strikes me because my organization, I figured out, is 16.4 months old. So the AMA is 168 years old now, I think. So Jim knows a little bit about sustainability from that perspective too, but he was the president of the AMA during the ACA discussions, which was, I'm sure, an interesting exercise. Mary Brainerd is the CEO at Health Partners. She's the president and CEO at Health Partners. It's the largest consumer-governed nonprofit health organization in the nation, located in Bloomington. We're going to ask Mary what it's like to actually work in a part of the country where everyone is above average, and I'm sure that you'll share that with us. But it also, before that, she also had experience working with Health Partners. Before Health Partners, she worked for Blue Cross Blue Shield and also for Blue Plus. And then finally, John Steiner is going to share some thoughts with us about interinstitutional research. John is at Kaiser Permanente, Colorado, and also works with the HMO Research Network. He's the Senior Director of the Institute of Health Research at KP Colorado since 2008. And he also serves, importantly, and germane to this, as the Chair of the KP National Research Council. He's the Chair of the Governing Board for the National HMO Research Network, and he's also been very active in the EDM Forum. So let me turn things over to Jim.